not subscribed to our channel, you can do so by clicking the subscribe button as shown above. Hello friends, welcome to Kamath Astrology. In today's video, we will cover a very important transit which is about to happen. On 13 March 2023, that is today, Mars has transited into the sign of Gemini or Mithun, and exactly 14 days from today, that is on 27th March 2023, Mars enters the fierce nakshatra of Ardra and stays there till 22nd April 2023. So in this video, we will do an impact analysis of this transit. Now first, let us understand what is the sign of Gemini or Mithun. It is the natural third house in the zodiac belt, and it represents communication, media, marketing. It is also an Aries sign. It is a dual natured sign. Now, being the third house in the zodiac belt, it also represents courage, it represents efforts, it represents short distance journeys. Now, what does Mars or Mangal represent? Mars or Mangal represents aggression, represents dominance, represents our fighting spirit, our willpower, the blood flowing through our body. Mars also represents soldiers, police force, army personnel, people associated with the armed forces. Finally, what does Ardra Nakshatra represent? Ardra Nakshatra is ruled by Rahu, and the deity of this nakshatra is the fierce form of Lord Shiva, that is Rudra, and therefore Ardra Nakshatra represents transformation, represents major changes, major upheavals. Ardra is also represented by a teardrop. Ardra also represents destruction. It also represents major transformations. Rudra, who rules the nakshatra of Ardra, is also known as the storm god, one who rules thunder, one who rules winds, and one who is very fierce and represents fire. Therefore, Ardra Nakshatra is actually a very destructive nakshatra. Now, what happens when an aggressive planet, when a hot planet like Mars or Mangal moves into this Ardra Nakshatra? The influence of Rahu, because Rahu rules the Ardra Nakshatra, the influence of the deity, that is Rudra, who rules the Ardra Nakshatra, indicates major transformations. Now, transformations often come through destructive events, disasters. Mars, being a very hot planet, represents fire, and the sign of Gemini, being an Aries sign, representing short distance travels, shows a lot of air accidents happening in this time period. There will also be lot of disruption in the communication systems, in the satellite systems across the world. Mars puts its destructive 8th aspect on the sign of Capricorn, where Pluto is present right now, which means that when Mars enters the Ardra Nakshatra and stays there for nearly a month, it will bring about major destruction in the European countries as well as in certain parts of China. Now, the sign of Gemini represents the northeastern regions, and therefore, even in India, the northern regions, that is the northeastern regions, such as Assam, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Nagaland, as well as the eastern portions, such as Bengal, will see a lot of destructive events happening in this time period. Mars represents the armed forces, the nakshatra of Ardra, as I mentioned earlier, represents destruction and transformation. And therefore, across the world, the armed forces, the police force will become very aggressive. And Mars is also someone who takes hasty decisions without thinking. He just jumps forward based on his intuition. And therefore, in this time period, the armed forces, the police force across the world will take very aggressive actions which they may regret later. So, this will also result in a lot of destruction. The aggressive action can be against terrorist forces, people of their own country, especially in countries where there are a lot of dictators. Mars also represents wars, Mars also represents fights, and therefore, since Mars' eighth aspect falls on Capricorn, where Pluto is present, it is going to bring about a major destruction in the European countries as well as in certain parts of China and the surrounding regions. Mars represents property, home, it also represents land, it represents the earth. Mars is considered as the son of earth, and therefore, when Mars goes in a fierce nakshatra such as Ardra, there will be major earthquakes across the world, mainly in the northeastern regions and the eastern regions. So, destructive events start when Mars enters the Ardra Nakshatra. So, what is good about this transit? Two things are good. One is that Mars in Ardra Nakshatra increases the curiosity and new innovations. So, new innovations will happen because of Mars moving into the Ardra Nakshatra. Mars is just transiting from the Mrigashira Nakshatra, which represents curiosity, and then he enters the Ardra Nakshatra. The second good thing is that the destruction which is caused by Mars in Ardra is followed by a rejuvenation or replenishment when Mars enters the Punarvasu Nakshatra on 22nd April 2023. So, this is a destruction followed by a regeneration which happens for the good of the society, the good of the world. Mars also represents competition. Mars represents fighting for your rights. So, across the world, you will see people fighting for their rights, people becoming more competitive, people exercising more, people more concerned with their physical well-being in this time period. So, Mars transit in Ardra may be destructive on the world front, but at an individual level, it can completely transform you into a better being. Mars puts the fourth aspect on the sign of Virgo, which represents both healing as well as conflicts and diseases. And therefore, in this time period, Mars is a very hot period. It is in a hot nakshatra like Ardra, and therefore, the tendency to involve in fights, to get more angry, increases in people across the world. So, we have to be very careful on this front in this time period. The seventh aspect of Mars from Ardra on the sign of Sagittarius can increase religious conflicts across the world, riots in different parts of the world. And the eighth destructive aspect of Mars on Capricorn, as I mentioned earlier, will bring about major transformations in the European countries and destructive natural disasters in such European countries as well as certain parts of China and surrounding regions. Now, I will not do a very detailed ascendant-wise analysis of this transit in general because this transit is happening in the Gemini ascendant. Gemini ascendant needs to be very careful, especially with respect to their anger, how they express their anger, and not to get involved in conflicts in this time period. Also, you might exercise a lot in this time period. Don't overdo anything, otherwise, it can give you a lot of trouble later. Mars's eighth aspect falls on the sign of Capricorn. So, the Capricorn ascendant or Capricorn moon sign, you also need to be very careful on the health front, and especially when you are driving a vehicle and with respect to land and property related disputes. Try to avoid such disputes, getting involved in such disputes in this time period, because it can harm you in a big way later. For the Sagittarius ascendant, relationships can be on a boil in this time period, especially with respect to your love life, your partners. So be careful on that front. Don't become very aggressive. Don't become violent in this time period. Aries ascendant, Rahu is already present there, and Mars is now in Rahu's nakshatra. Therefore, be careful with respect to the kind of desires that you are getting in your mind. It can land you in trouble in this time period. Do not go overboard and cheat someone in this time period or employ unfair means in achieving what you want. In general, air travel will be a complex affair in this time period. Flights may go haywires, there might be delays, as well as a lot of air accidents in this time period. Wars using fiery weapons through the air will increase in this time period. So the Russia-Ukraine war, especially if you see, will use very destructive weapons in this time period, and that can cause a lot of harm to the economy and to the world in general. Now, what are some of the ways by which you can calm down Mars? The easiest way to calm down Mars is to start worshipping Lord Hanuman or Lord Narsimha every Tuesday or daily if possible. That will control the energy of Mars. Now remember that Mars in Ardra is destructive due to the nature of that nakshatra, and it involves very high energy. But if you are able to direct this energy correctly towards constructive activities, then this Mars in Ardra can be a great boon for you. So try to involve yourself more in constructive activities than in destructive activities. Gemini is the sign of communication, so do not get involved in gossips. Instead, try to be proactive in your communications. Try to be smart in your communications. Do not go round the bush. Do not cheat people. And Mars will do good for you. Lastly, Mars represents the earth element. Mars represents land. So protect land, plant more trees. Do not destroy land. Do not destroy homes. Do not forcibly take anybody's property. Otherwise, there will be severe consequences because of this transit of Mars in Ardra. The controlling deity of Mars is also Kartikeya or Skanda. So worshipping Skanda in this time period will also give you good results. Mars represents articles such as honey, red sindoor. So donating red sindoor or offering red sindoor to a Hanuman idol on Tuesdays will help you in a big way, especially if Mars is malefic for you. Most importantly, Mars represents action in emergency. So if you need to help someone who is stuck in an emergency, say a person gets a heart attack and you need to rush him to the hospital, then definitely go forward and help such people. That will benefit you. That will make your Mars better in this time period. Lastly, Ardra Nakshatra represents thunder, storms, and because of Mars's presence in the Ardra Nakshatra, storms, cyclones, thunder as well as rain will automatically happen in the northeastern parts and the eastern parts of the world. So friends, thanks a lot. Bye. Take care and stay safe. For any queries, please write to us at astrosevaworld@yahoo.com and we'll be glad to assist you.